Now, when we're talking about the world of Subnautica or its creatures, and especially their lore, I'm a big fan of picking out things that are somewhat creepy, or at least eerie, because I just think it makes for a more interesting video. Well, in today's one, we will in fact be going right against that, as we will be talking about an area of the game which is presumably one of the friendliest and nicest to be around without the need to look over your shoulder for crazy dangerous creatures too much. That's right, in today's video we will be talking about the Safe Shallows. I'll be telling you everything we know about this biome that you encounter very early on, where it's located, what points of interest you can find in there, how it probably formed, what kind of fauna and flora you can find in there, and any other interesting points of trivia or theories that I'm able to dig up. Now before we begin, I want to preface this by saying that this will obviously contain spoilers from the world and potentially story of Subnautica, so if you don't want to have any of that spoiled and you haven't played the game yet, I strongly recommend clicking off the video and coming back to it later. Now with that out of the way, be careful when you're exiting your life pod, make sure you have your oxygen tank on, and let's go. Now first of all, as already mentioned, these Safe Shallows are, technically speaking, the first biome that the player will actually encounter right after exiting their life pod number 5, which just happened to crash there after the Aurora crash landed on planet 4546b. Now the area itself is, as the name kind of suggests, a rather shallow set of coral reefs, smaller caves and openings, all covered in beautiful vibrant flora and a rich fauna life that can be seen all around you right as you hit the water for the first time. Now technically speaking, this area can be separated into two smaller parts, the upper part and the lower part, which is a cave system that runs rather close right underneath the surface. Now this being a beginner and a tutorial based area, obviously, we're sticking with some very reasonable depths of around 0 to 80 meters deep and very pleasant temperatures of about 26 to 32 degrees Celsius. Now in terms of farming, this is a fantastic location to be in, as considering the Aurora crash is rather near, you get a ton of fallaway resources like metal salvage which can be picked up and broken down into titanium, and other than that, you get a very vibrant set of flora that you can pick up, and of course, especially around the coral reefs, you get a plethora of limestone and sandstone outcrops. Now in terms of fauna, there is a whole lot of creatures that populate this area, but most predominantly we're talking about the ever so useful watercrafting bladderfish, the colorful boomerangs, scaryfish and peepers, the poisonous rabbit race, the occasional somewhat dangerous gasopod which can in fact poison you, and of course the ever-present floaters which just kind of hang around. In terms of flora, what you can find here are the somewhat dangerous acid mushrooms which are safe if you pick them up by hand, but will in fact hurt you if you try cutting them with a knife, the blue palm tree which can be picked up and planted elsewhere if you like the aesthetic of it, the somewhat rare spotted reeds which just looks like a slightly more advanced version of the seaweed, a beautiful fan-like violet colored veined nettle, and of course the lightly bioluminescent writhingweed. Besides the plant life, this biome also contains a whole bunch of coral structures, most specifically the pinkish brain corals which actually produce oxygen that will refill your tank if you stay above them, then the coral shell plate, slanted shell plate, and the veined shell plate, which are essentially all the same species, just slightly different based on the location where they grew, some table corals which can, depending on the location, vary in color, and of course the very iconic giant coral tubes, the purpose of which isn't necessarily exactly known, but it is presumed that they help direct some of the water and nutrients throughout the area to the bigger coral reefs. Now of course, just as already mentioned, if you dive just a little bit deeper, you can get to explore the so-called Safe Shallows caves, which are simply a plethora of small cave systems which kind of run all around and below the Safe Shallows area, ranging in depth from about 10 to approximately 75 meters, often being covered in some of the more bioluminescent flora like the acid mushrooms, veined nettle, and breathing weeds. But considering these do have the very hostile inhabitants of the crashfish, they are also a good place to farm some sulfur. Now interestingly enough, in the original design there were sometimes meant to be boulders which are covering some of these caves as entrances that you would be able to either drill away with the prawn suit or simply move with the propulsion cannon. However, more often than not, chances are you will not actually see these, as they either tend to float up because a floater attaches to them, or simply clip through the floor and just fall out of existence. Effectively speaking, that is all of the information that we are outright given about these safe shallows. However, there are a few more points I'd like to cover just before we end this video off. Now, as you may or may not know, depending on how closely you followed other lore regarding Subnautica, one of the Degassi members, Bart Torgal, who was, well, before Below Zero, presumed to be the final remaining survivor of that crew, decided to build one of his bases in the safe shallows, and it is right now thought that that base is actually currently buried underneath the Aurora, which is one of the reasons why we can't find any of their parts. On the topic of the Aurora crash though, it is worth noting that there seems to be some sort of a tiny bleed effect happening around the area where several biomes are kind of bleeding into each other, presumably because of the disturbance of the biome borders that the crash itself caused, which could be one of the explanations for the Reapers being there, but it also could be an explanation for a weird bug that seems to happen to some people where random gel sacks will actually spawn around the Aurora. And finally, just to end this off, even though a lot of the safe shallow areas are actually formed by coral, it is worth noting that a lot of those cave systems and intricate structures that are on the surface are actually most likely created by all the volcanic activity that used to happen in this place before the volcano kind of went quiet underneath the surface. So essentially speaking, what you're seeing now are very old remnants of what could have been a very active volcano back in the day, but it has obviously since led way to some more fertile and colorful grounds. But with that, I want to end this video off, and I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope you learned at least something new about the wonderful world of Subnautica. If you did, maybe consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. All of those would be very much appreciated. And if there's anything I missed or a theory that you would like to cover, make sure to leave that out in the comments below as well. I would very much like to read it. Now with that, I want to wish you a beautiful rest of the day, and I'll see you all in whatever next video I make. Bye bye.